Hi, welcome to the Israel First television program from our studios in Jerusalem. Great to have you with us. Great to be with you again. I'm introducing myself, Martin Blackham, and I'm with my wife, Nathalie Blackham. And we are the program that looks at the news from Israel. We look behind the news. We look at what's really happening in the news in Israel and the world. And we also look at the Hebrew roots and look at the Hebrew letters, and also the spiritual aspects of what's happening in Israel and in the world. Now, one of the most important events which hasn't been covered by the mainstream media, which was attended by the Israeli president, was the World Economic Forum. And the reason I mention that is that we need to look at what's happening with the one world government, with the globalists, to have an overall picture of what's happening in Israel, and first of all, and what's happening in the world. Now, the Jewish Insider News, Nathalie, did cover the story. Nobody else seemed to be that interested, or maybe they were told not to cover it. Asked the important question as to what we are to expect at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Davos is in Switzerland and is where they have the annual World Economic Forum meeting that is publicly known about. It's possible that these meetings go on behind our backs all the time, but this is one that is publicly known and publicly arranged. Now, the One World Government leaders coming to this included Elon Musk, who has been coming to Israel, by the way, Mark Zuckerberg, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman, and Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella were at the meeting in Davos. Not quite sure why they had to be there, but they were there amongst all the other world leaders. But what the question is, what are these dangerous globalists up to? What are they really doing? Not what they're telling us they'd like us to know, but what's behind the scenes. Now, it was the 54th World Economic Forum, and it was headed by the infamous Klaus Schwab. Also included Israel's president, as I mentioned before, Isaac Herzog, the Ukrainian president Volodymyr Zelensky, despite the wars going on. Now, it's very interesting that the Ukraine situation, or Ukraine war, and the Gaza war are still going on, by the way, but they have time to go there, and it's more important than the wars going on in their own countries, which is a bit strange. You would think in the Second World War we didn't have leaders popping around the world all together, except for when there were emergency meetings, certainly not for an economic meeting. By the way, also at the World Economic Forum was the Secretary of State Blackham, and Nathalie, French President Emmanuel Macron was there, gave time to go there. Now listen to this. First of all, it's strange that these presidents can go at the time of war. The second strange thing is Israel's president, Isaac Herzog, was publicly in the company of, listen to this, Lebanon's Prime Minister Najib Mikati, and the Arab Prime Ministers of Jordan, Qatar, and Iraq. This is unheard of in history, that during an Arab-Israeli war, the president of Israel is with Arab prime ministers and of countries where they could be attacked from Lebanon.
Choosing together.
Yeah, never heard of before. So this is very strange. So we should be alerted that there's something more going on. Why is it so important for all these presidents to be together, all these prime ministers to be together? And what are they really up to? What's really cooking behind the scenes? Because what we're being told in the media and what is really happening are not the same thing. Now, the managing director of the unelected, by the way, they are unelected, this World Economic Forum, said world leaders must come together to address short-term crises that's in the world. They are dealing with world issues, as well as lay the groundwork for a more resilient, sustainable, inclusive future. All sounds very harmless very noble in a way. Well, what do they mean when they say sustainable, inclusive future? How about the destruction of farming? The introduction in Israel of alternative meat, which we've mentioned before, the destruction of farming on the borders of Israel where the people are just not there. The replacement of meat with bugs for human consumption is something which has been promoted by the World Economic Forum. The removal of private motor vehicles.
Meanwhile, they are eating some very good food.
Right.
We have to eat the bugs, but they can eat
steaks.
They could eat the meat.
And they can have the steak at the conference, but we can have bugs. Climate control, the hoax of global warming, replacement of fossil fuels, which are the natural things from the earth. Obviously the right things, because we've been using them for centuries with no problem, but now suddenly we have to get rid of them all. Electric vehicles, which seem to be exploding regularly. Vaccination of the world population with all the problems caused by the vaccination, and we've talked about that before. Movements of population migration, you can see that in every nation. In every Western nation, there is a migration movement. People are coming into the country, and that's wherever you're watching in the world. Reduction of population, combination of humans with AI. This is something that they are working on, where we're connected to computers, the great internet, the internet of all things, they call it, where everybody is connected, and they say it's for health reasons, that they'll be able to monitor your heart via computer. So they'll also be able to monitor when you're sleeping, when you're not sleeping, etc. But that's not what you should be worried about, because they're going to know everything.
No, you're right. But not only that, they are promoting in media, take this app and you can see how you sleep, because all the data goes for them. So they ask people to do things. People say, oh yeah, this is very clever and all of that. They put us having stress, so people don't sleep so well, so they want to do it, and so all the data goes to where? To all these people, so they can monitor what's happening with the people. Again, it's like control.
Yeah, it's basically systems of control, including we've talked about this before, the fact that electric vehicles, they can control them externally. Your vehicle will suddenly stop, whether you want it to or not. All the other things about the Internet of Persons, the use of surveillance cameras, 15-minute cities. We've talked about all this before. This is something that the World Economic Forum are actively promoting. And why is it so important? Because Israel is first. It is here that many of the things that they are promoting are actually happening in front of our eyes.
So all the social media are very good for people to be able to have a social life, but usually you have a normal social life with people. But then with all this social media app, they are really trying to control and have data, because they need to have the data to know how the people are, to be able to control even more, how the people are.
So this is the big picture. Now, David Wolf, in his Telegram channel, made an interesting comment when he was talking about how people are reacting to it. And he said, the one world government run by the Antichrist is developing right before our eyes and is being coordinated overtly by the World Economic Forum. And this is something we need to keep our eye on, because this is happening in front of us. It's part of the redemption. We know that all the things are coming to a head, the one world government and the Antichrist and all of the paraphernalia that we're getting. Now, in Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu has said that Israel will fight on until total victory, in inverted commas, as the country has recently passed 100 days of war. Speaking at a press conference, by the way, just as a kind of a by the by, I was thinking this through, and it's all about destroying. If you listen to his press conferences or the media being pumped out, it's all about destroying Hamas. But how on earth are you going to destroy a kind of ideology? It's a bit like saying, oh, we're going to destroy the IRA. Well, how are you on earth are you going to do that? It is not possible, I don't think, to destroy an ideology. Anyway, he said the war is continuing on all fronts and until its aims are achieved, which is, as I say, the destruction of an ideology, which is impossible. The victory will take many more long months. Well, where we've heard that before, that it continues and it keeps continuing. But we are determined to achieve it. In other words, we're not stopping. And this is going to be on the agenda for the near future, or indeed the long future. Meanwhile, just in case you thought, well, you know, sooner or later, Gaza's not that big a piece of land. Sooner or later, it must come under some sort of control. In the north, the IDF chief, the chief of staff, the senior general, says war in Lebanon is becoming more likely. The likelihood that Israel will be drawn into a war with Lebanon is growing, which is very strange, bearing in mind the Lebanese prime minister and the Israeli president were just schmoozing, as Nathalie was saying, at the World Economic Forum. So it's very strange that suddenly there's going to be a war there. IDF Chief of Staff General Herzl Halevi said hours after Hamas attacked with a barrage of rockets at a northern town. I've said that right, not a southern town, a northern town. And I've said it right, it wasn't Hezbollah, it was Hamas. Well, what on earth are Hamas doing in the north as well as in the south? Well, that's a very good question. We know Hezbollah are there. They've been there for years and years and years, and there have been battles with them for many years. But what are Hamas doing in the north? I don't know when the war in the north will happen, he said. So, I mean, does he know something? I mean, he says he doesn't know, but does he know? I can tell you that the likelihood of it happening in the coming months is much higher than in the past. So, very strange, because does he know something that we don't know? And he's trying to hint at it for people who should know. Now, the current situation, what's it actually happening on the ground in Israel? Because the question you will have is, well, what is actually happening on the ground? Well, businesses are suffering, and the Jerusalem Post recently reported on an Israeli army reservist who's been forced to sell his business as his reserve duty stretches over 100 days. Now, I mention this because this is an example of what is happening. This is happening for everybody. Everybody who has their own business will be suffering because of the war if they're on reserve duty, because guess what? They can't be in their business. They can't run the business, or they have to get other people to run the business. And you know what it's like if you get other people to run it? It's not always run in the same way that you would do it. So a lot of the soldiers, by the way, have come from the tech industry, have come from being self-employed. There are a lot of people go into self-employment in Israel. They create a business and off they go. And it's encouraged. It's one of the things that happens usually, by the way. It happens in the army. You meet other people and decide on doing a certain affair, as the French would say, and a business. And so he started a business, and now he's been 100 days away from his business. He was called up on October the 7th, as are many, including people in our street. He's the owner of a business in Jaffa, not so far from where our son and daughter-in-law were living. And it was a unique furniture store. It specialised in Indonesian furniture. However, the economic toll of his extended military service has left the business on the verge of collapse. Anav, that's the name of the soldiers, lamented his once thriving business has now crumbled, leaving him with millions in debt. I'll say that again. He was left with millions of shekels in debt and facing an uncertain future upon his return from reserve duty. People have invested huge amounts of money, and families have invested huge amounts of money, and banks, etc.
You have to see that it's not just him, it's him and the family and the children, and it's like, it's just terrible.
And we're not talking about those who've been killed or injured in Gaza, the Israeli soldiers, who also are now in the situation of either not being here on the earth or being injured and not able to run their business because they've been hospitalized, some with very serious injuries.
Yes.
So again, not able to run their business.
Which means that some lost their maimed, so it means that they are not going to be able to work how they were able to work before. It means that they need physiotherapy or some surgery, and the family is not the same. I mean, it's like disruption on every side, and it's very difficult. And you have to understand that Israel is they are a country, but they are not a country. They are people, first of all. So when hurts, which is interesting because it's what we say in the New Testament, when one hurts, everybody hurts. Okay, it's exactly the same in Israel. One hurts, everybody hurts. So you can imagine the pain right now in Israel. I will tell you, even me personally, I can't read a lot of news right now because it's too much. I have to look at other things. I need to look at positive things. And I know that there is many people like that. So we will speak a bit more about that after.
Yeah, I think the thing is, the media is being controlled, and so the mainstream media, that is the big news channels, etc., are being controlled, and they are being allowed to say certain things. And then the other thing that's being controlled, you say, well, I don't look at the mainstream media, I just look on the internet. Well, guess what? The internet is being controlled.
Yes.
And so if you try to use a search engine and press Israel, you will get the Israel war. Even if you're looking into, say, for example, Israeli agriculture and you're interested in that, guess what will come up in your search immediately? Will be the war. And so it is being thrust down people's throats every day of the week. By the way, people are a bit addicted in Israel to news before this all happened. So this has only made matters worse, that now they can't stop watching it. And so it's on everywhere. When you travel, people have got the news
and
on.
the campaign for the
Return of the hostages.
That's it, yeah. And yes, obviously we need to think about them, but it's very interesting. Again, Martin was doing some research, or it was also Rabbi Weissman, and he was saying the one who was doing the campaign for COVID, or were doing the campaign for the
jab.
Well, that's it, for the jab. They are the one who are doing the campaign now for the return of the hostages. So there is a lot of things behind the scene which is not what...
There's some things that aren't right.
Kosher.
But in the middle of everything, we are expecting the redemption, Nathalie, and I know
Exactly.
you've got a lot of things to say today.
So this is very interesting because today is Tu B'Shvat, and Tu B'Shvat is not very well known outside maybe of Israel, but is the new year for the trees. And we said, but the trees are still
so it's
barren right now.
It's Happy Tree Day.
That's it, yeah. And a lot of people usually plant tree. By the way, we didn't hear anything this year about that. But I was having a Zoom yesterday with some friends, and we were learning more about it. And it's very interesting because it's very much like where we are at prophetically right now. Is like you are eating the fruits of the trees, but the trees are still asleep. And so it's like you are thinking about the redemption. You are thinking about the good thing that God is going to do, but you can't see it yet. And it's exactly what's happening right now. Here we can see pain, we can see suffering, we can see death, we can see sickness, we can see families who are destroyed. You have widows, orphans. So you have like a barrenness. There is something is cold, is still the winter. But you know that in the ground, the sap is starting to come into the trees. You know that the seed has been planted and the seed is destroyed before growing. And this is part of redemption. This is, and we said it many times, is that what we could see Also, when the Hebrews were going out of Mitzrayim, of Egypt. By the way, you know, Mitzrayim is like a narrowness. So it means they were in a narrowness, and God wanted to put them in a pleasant place, which is what the world now is going. This, before, it was like a blueprint. This just happened to the Hebrew people many centuries ago. But now, as the world, we are going through this process, and that there is this, the seed is dying, but there is the power of this new life coming up, and we need to see ourselves transform through that. It's not without pain, like a mother, we were speaking also about like a mother who is going to have a child. There is a suffering, after there is a joy, and when there is a joy, it's like you forget about the suffering, which is just amazing. Now, there was also something, so you can see, is a kind of, God is a bit hiding himself, because it's us who have to choose him. Every one of us. He doesn't want to force himself on us. So he's just hiding himself, but he's not far. And when we start to do the first step, he is there. Now, when you read the Psalm 23, we already spoke about that, but I wanted to pick up a bit on that also today. Is like, you remember, Ki ata imadi, which means, then you are with me. In the valley of death, you are with me. It's the translation. But when you look the Hebrew, imadi means you are standing with me. So God is standing with us. However, what's happening, he is with us all the time. It's his name, Yud, He, and Vav and He. This is the God who is, who was, and will be. Okay. Now there is another passage also in this Psalm 23, and I read it many years ago, and when I started to read it in Hebrew, is like, in English, it said, his goodness and his mercy will be with me and will be given to me. I can't remember now exactly the translation in English, but in Hebrew, first of all, the goodness, yes, is tov. His mercy is chesed. Okay, chesed is kindness, something more tangible. Mercy, sometimes is a bit abstract, but kindness, God is kind with us all the time. And the verb, let me find the verb exactly, because I want to see it right, is hadaf, okay? And hadaf means he's pursuing me, he's chasing me, he's on my heel, because he wants to bring his goodness. He wants to bring his kindness in my life, in your life, in our life, all the time, and is what he's doing all the time. And this is what God is doing right now. We need to see, and I know it's difficult. I tell you, I know it's difficult. It's difficult for us too. But we need to see that we are in a very deep transformation all around the world. And God is doing it. And he's reviving us deep inside. It makes our soul want to cling to him. And at the end of the Psalm 23 is like, so I will be in your home, I will stand in your home. And his shuv is like standing, is like I will dwell, is, I think is what is written in English. I will dwell with him in his presence forever.
Wow. And this is something that's happening, Nathalie, isn't it? We're seeing the birth pains, and particularly here in Israel, we're seeing that with not just with the war, but with everything going on, with all the systems of the one world government, with the surveillance society, the whole thing, the control system. We're seeing all the things were installed for the establishment of this one world government, and at the same time we're seeing the redemption. It's a funny thing, we're seeing the two things together. We're seeing that there's a crying out for God, yes, which has never happened before, because there's never been things in the world that have happened like this. Now, yes, one of the things in Israel has been the cost, Nathalie, of the war, and it's expected, they say, to cost about 50 billion at the present rate. In 2024, that could be more if things change. That's just on the basis of the current expectations, and they're going to increase the budget by another 30 billion shekels, the finance ministry has reported. It's taking a toll, as I was saying, on businesses, and you're finding this wherever you go. Some businesses have stopped. Also, we've mentioned on the program that it's difficult to get workers down because at the present time, they have stopped Palestinian Arab workers from coming across the border. Generally speaking, there are exceptions, but generally speaking, they have been stopped, which means that a lot of building sites, a lot of building projects have been prevented. And so the economy is teetering, really. It's a miracle. I always think, it's a miracle we have provision. Now, normally you think, well, in the West, it's expected. We've always had provision. We've always had shopping centres, shops, etc., businesses, etc. But at the moment, I'm very grateful that there are businesses that are operating with what's going on, and that's the reality of what's happening on the ground in Israel. Now, if you want to get the news that we're doing a regular, with the grace of God, we're doing a regular daily news story. I'm trying, and you could get that on the website on our media page, Israel News. And Nathalie is doing a weekly update. You can get that as well. You can subscribe to our weekly update again on the website. A lot of information on there, and thank you so much for your support. It's because of your support that we can come to you in your homes, that we can come and bring you what's happening behind the scenes in Israel, what's really happening and how it's affecting people in the land. The website has a donate page. You can help us to do the program, as I mentioned, and if you'd like some more information about donating, please do contact us. And remember, we are the program that looks at the land, the people, and the language.